In the world of Jujutsu Kaisen, there's a hidden war raging beneath the surface of everyday life. A war between humanity and the cursed energy born from our darkest emotions. This cursed energy flows through everyone, but only a rare few can control it. These are the Jujutsu Sorcerers, individuals trained to master their fear, anger, and grief, and transform it into a weapon against the twisted manifestation known as curses. Jujutsu isn't just raw power, it's a complex system of techniques and domain expansions, all governed by strategy, intelligence, and an iron will. Sorcerers tap into these abilities to protect the world from threats that most people never even realize exist. But not all sorcerers are created equal. Some are brilliant tacticians, others unstoppable forces of nature, and a select few redefine the limits of what Jujutsu can be. In this video, I'll be ranking every single one of these Jujutsu Sorcerers from Jujutsu Kaisen, from the underrated to the outright broken. We'll look at their techniques, their impact on the story, their combat prowess, and where they stand amongst the best in the series. And with that said, this is a huge project with a lot of love put into it. So if you would like more videos such as this, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. And now, let's get into it. To begin the list, Aoi Rin is a character we would meet far into the story of Jujutsu Kaisen, all the way in chapter 161. He was first working with Haba in the Culling Game in order to survive, but upon recognizing Yuji and remembering that Yuji had always been extremely powerful and kind, he made the decision to work with Yuji and guide him toward Higuruma. He would also repay his debt to Yuji for defeating Haba in the Culling Game by saving Hana after she was defeated by Sukuna toward the end of the Culling Game. After this, he seems to work with Shoko as a doctor, medic kind of character in the final battle against Sukuna. As I'm sure you can tell, Aoi Rin was on the battlefield at one point, but he was never really a combatant kind of character. He's relatively weak as a Jujutsu sorcerer, and his curse technique is to manipulate his own blood sugar and turn it into pudding. This doesn't really do much but keep others conscious if they're about to pass out or pass away. He's not really remarkable or anything, but he is a pretty good guy and a pretty good character for his role in the story. Remy is another Culling Game character we will meet in Tokyo Colony No. 1. Whereas Aoi promised Yuji to lead him to Higuruma, Remy made that same promise to Megumi, but Remy had actually been lying. She led Megumi into a trap to get jumped by other players, but little did she know that Megumi was more than capable of holding his own against all of them. She had done this because she typically holds a symbiotic relationship with the men in her life, and completely relies on them to be safe. So, she played bait for Reggie Star and his crew to gain easy points or recruit strong combatants into their group that was preparing for Kenjaku's next move. Megumi does try to kill her after she betrays him, but he lets her go due to his sister's words playing in his head. From there on, she's captured by the US government and never seen again, although it is implied that Maki went to save her at the end of the story. Remy is not a combatant at all, as again, she straight up says that she's always relied on others to deal with anything in her life. She also has a very weak curse technique in the form of scorpion-like hair, which Megumi was able to completely shrug off during the initial confrontation against Reggie. Remy is more than certainly one of the weakest sorcerers in the series. Next, we have Junpei. Junpei Yoshino was a high school student who was pretty introverted and indifferent toward most people due to his history of being bullied while growing up. Junpei would eventually come across Mahito, who manipulated him into becoming a person full of hate. But he would also meet Yuji, who helped him out of his twisted mindset, as Yuji became a true and good friend to him. Eventually, Mahito's manipulation would result in him giving Junpei a curse technique and causing him to lash out on his high school. Yuji eventually intervenes and tries to save him, but Mahito transfigures him into a monster beyond repair, taking Junpei's life. Junpei is pretty strong for being someone who had like 2 days of experience with Jujutsu, but he really never got to do much past those 2 days as he passed away shortly after. Junpei's curse technique is Moon Dregs. This summons a jellyfish Shikigami whose tendrils will poison anybody it makes contact with. Its tendrils are also powerful enough to pierce through the flesh of any of its targets. There was clearly some potential with Junpei, but the story did him filthy and got rid of him ASAP, so we're never gonna get to see it. Hanyu is another character we would meet on chapter 161 at the very beginning of the Culling Game. She was working alongside Haba to target and eliminate newbies in the Culling Game the moment they would enter it. Unlucky for them, they would run into Yuji Itadori and he would easily defeat the two of them, and they were pretty much never seen again, so there's not much to talk about. Hanyu is a weak sorcerer compared to most, and her ability is not all that powerful. She was absolutely no match for Yuji, who defeated her with nothing but raw strength. Her curse technique consists of her changing her hair into the shape of a jet in order to give her the ability to fly or charge at others at insane speeds. The primary problem with this ability is that it costs her a lot of her curse energy that is all focused onto her hair. So what this does is expose every other part of her body with less curse energy than usual. So if someone can time their attacks against her, they can easily deal serious damage. She's overall weak with a bigger weakness. Mei Zenin finds herself to be the first character of the main cast on the list. Mei is the twin sister of Maki Zenin, who was also treated as an outcast by the Zenin clan due to the two sisters having no affinity for Jujutsu whatsoever. Mei in particular has such little affinity for Jujutsu that she can barely use her technique in a meaningful way without exhausting herself. The primary difference between Maki and Mei is the fact that Mei chose to stay in the Zenin clan, whereas Maki made the decision to work toward leaving by becoming a powerful sorcerer. This will result in her also being pushed to become a sorcerer due to them being twins. This results in their relationship being very strained, but they eventually work it out. Mei also attends the other sorcerer school, Kyoto Jujutsu High, instead of the main one located in Tokyo. We see Mei here and there, but not really much throughout the story, and her story concludes by her sacrificing herself to create a sword that can cut through souls for her sister to wield, and so she can actually access her true strength. Mei is very weak because she was a twin, and the Jujutsu system usually counts twins as one being, so both of the twins were at half of their normal battle capacity until Mei passed away, allowing Maki to finally access the full power of her heavenly restriction. Mei typically fights with weapons imbued with her curse energy, as she doesn't have enough firepower to physically combat curses. Her curse technique was construction, but she was so incompetent with the ability that a single bullet would completely drain her. Overall, Mei is pretty much weak because she never wanted to become strong, and the world itself was very unfair to her. No Good Miwa finds herself right above Mei on this list, as she's quite weak herself, but can somewhat hold her own. She's another student of Kyoto Jujutsu Tech. Miwa is actually a very kind sorcerer, and despite her believing that she's no more than a burden to others, she still tries her hardest to support them and to succeed as a Jujutsu sorcerer, as she wants to support her siblings financially. Despite her low confidence, she's more than willing to face an overwhelming opponent for the sake of others. Miwa doesn't really make too many appearances in the story, but things do turn out okay for her. Miwa is a swordsman who practices the new shadow style. She first had access to Simple Domain, which allowed her to neutralize a domain short hit effect within a set area of space around her, and Naobato sword drawing. This allows her to reinforce her sheathed blade with curse energy, and then rotate it so she can slash at opponents at insane speeds. Despite these powerful abilities, Miwa herself really wasn't all that competent, and she would lose all her abilities when creating a binding vow to sacrifice all of her power in order to massively increase the strength of her sword drawing against Kenjaku, but Kenjaku would parry the attack with ease. Haba is the partner of Hanyu, and we would also meet him in chapter 161 during the Culling Game. Haba, like Hanyu, is pretty aggressive and was trying to knock out players from the Culling Game before they even had a chance to begin, but he unluckily ran into Yuji, and Yuji would manage to defeat him quite easily. Unlike Hanyu, he would actually be confirmed to be eliminated by the US military when they would first enter the Culling Game themselves. Haba has a very similar curse technique to Hanyu, in which his hair is changed into an aircraft and he's able to access its properties. In Haba's case, he has helicopter hair, and he can use this ability to fly around in the air or manipulate his propeller-like hair in all sorts of ways to cut things down. He has the same exact weakness as Hanyu too, with most of his curse energy being put into his hair rather than spread out across his body like most sorcerers. He's also pretty weak, as Culling Game Yuji destroyed him in a fight. Charles Bernard is our favorite egocentric, French aspiring mangaka who we would meet in the beginning of the Tokyo Colony No. 2 arc of the Culling Game saga. He's an extreme otaku kind of like Hakkari, but he takes his obsession with manga to stupid levels where he gets himself into his first fight in the series because he would ask Hakkari to give him a reason for them to fight to the death. And when they would fight, he would make tons of references to all sorts of media in their battle. Despite this, Hakkari is pretty personable, so he was able to beat and recruit Charles into Jujutsu High's efforts in saving the world after he had beaten him into a pulp. We see that Charles did eventually give his ability to Yuta for him to use it against Sukuna in the final arc, and he goes on about his life at the end of Jujutsu Kaisen like everybody else who survived. Charles is somewhat strong, as he has a basic understanding of how Jujutsu works as a whole, and he was even able to make Hakkari go all out against him in a fight. Although this was more so Hakkari wanting to give Charles a beatdown so bad that he would never forget it. Despite this, it's noteworthy. Charles has the ability to create a weapon referred to as the G War Staff. This is a spear with a pen-shaped tip to represent the part of him that loves writing manga, and if he cuts or stabs his opponent with the tip of the spear, their blood will enter into the pen's tip, and then he can hit his opponent with a manga panel. This manga panel will stick onto the opponent and allow Charles to see 1 second into their future. The more that Charles can successfully pull this off, the more into their future he can see. Charles would be someone extremely dangerous if he were a special grade sorcerer, but his stats are so low that he really can't make much use of this ability. Despite this, he's strong. Momo Nishimiya surprisingly finds herself higher than most people think she would be. She is another student from Kyoto Jujutsu Tech, and she's one who cares about her parents a lot due to her beliefs of women being held to a higher standard and in more areas than men in the world of Jujutsu. Despite this, she seems to just go with the flow and do what she believes will always help the most people. We don't see her much, and when we do, she's not contributing much, but she is one of the characters who gets to survive the story and get a happy ending. Momo is a semi-grade 2 sorcerer and isn't really a combat type of character. Despite this, she has quite a troublesome ranged ability in the form of her tool manipulation, allowing her to control a broom with telepathy. She typically uses the broom the same way a magician would from the Harry Potter series, by riding it around, but she can also swing the broom as she's riding it to create wind attacks. The reason why I placed her up here is specifically after the final battle against Sukuna. She was apologetic for not doing anything in the battle against Sukuna, which from my perspective implies that she was an actual option for battle, so she likely has access to Simple Domain and Reverse Curse Technique. Nobara Kugisaki is the first Tokyo Jujutsu sorcerer to make it onto the list, and she serves as the protagonist of the show until she's basically replaced by Yuta halfway through the series. She puts up a pretty mean front when meeting people, but it doesn't take much for her to soften up as she builds up her bond with the main cast. Nobara is also a character who really values authenticity, as she always makes it a point to stay true to who she is due to her past as an outsider of her home village. After a battle against Mahito and Shibuya, she's placed into a coma and retired for over half of the series, returning during the final battle against Sukuna to help Yuji land a decisive blow. Nobara really isn't that impressive in terms of stats, but her true danger lies from her curse technique, the Straw Doll technique. This is a curse technique that revolves around the usage of a straw doll used in the traditional sense, as Nobara carries a hammer, nails, and straw doll to use all of her techniques and attacks with. Nobara can use the resonance attack with this technique by grabbing any body part of a target and stabbing the straw doll into it with a nail in order to cause black spikes to come out of their chest. This attack also directly affects the soul as well. Nobara can also stick a nail in her opponent and expand the curse energy surrounding it in order to massively increase their size. It's a very brutal technique that allows her to negate the durability of her opponents and even directly strike the soul, and Nobara is usually intelligent enough to find ways to activate these abilities in battle. Panda is the second Jujutsu sorcerer from Tokyo Jujutsu Tech to make it on this list. Despite his appearance and name, he's not actually a panda, but instead a cursed doll created by Masamichi Yaga. He's a second-year student of Tokyo Tech alongside Yuta, Maki, and Inumaki, and he serves as kind of the pretty cool big brother to all of the students, at least until the third year Hakkari is introduced to the cast. Panda doesn't really take anything serious unless it's extremely close to him. He's overall just there to add levity to the story at times, but he does have his good moments in the series. But in a series where pretty much every character who gets focus has amazing moments, he doesn't stand out much. Panda is sort of the ultimate all-rounder in the story and is at the level of a grade 1 sorcerer despite his placement on the list. It's just that from here, placements are going to rapidly increase in strength. Panda has high strength, speed, and enough intelligence to even impress Suguru Geto, a special grade sorcerer in battle. As Panda is kind of an artificial being with a soul, he operates Jujutsu a little bit differently from the rest of the characters on this list. Panda moves with 3 cores in his body. The first is Panda, the second is Gorilla, and the third is Triceratops. He shifts through these forms in order to have different abilities and stats in battle. Panda's first form is the one he's often in, which is the Panda form. It's supposed to be a balanced kind of type that allows him to be proficient in each of his stats. The Gorilla mode is kind of a Kaioken state where Panda increases all of his stats at the cost of much more curse energy being used than usual. Not only this, he gains access to the unblockable drumming beat. This reinforces all of his attacks with a shockwave that will negate all of his opponent's defenses. Last is the Triceratops mode. We don't really know what this does, as it would be obliterated before Panda got to do anything with it sadly. All in all, Panda was a powerful sorcerer with many options, but he apparently lost these cores after his battle with Kashimo. Kirara Hoshi is another student from Tokyo Jujutsu Tech, and actually the last of them that we meet in the series. Kirara is Hakkari's partner in crime, and the two are pretty much always seen together unless Hakkari's in battle, as Kirara is more of the support type kind of character. Kirara, like Hakkari, is pretty kind and loyal to all of their friends, and is willing to put their lives on the line for them if they truly need it. Kirara also follows a concept called the Fever, in which they like to judge people's characters off of their desires and how far they're willing to go to achieve them. We don't really get to see Kirara be more of an advisor to Hakkari after their fight against Megumi. Kirara is pretty powerful in her own right, as she was able to stall out Panda and Megumi in a 2-on-1 battle for a decent amount of time before they would figure out her technique and restrain her. She has a pretty complicated technique that's based off the Southern Cross constellation. Kirara gets 5 stars from this constellation: Imai, a Crux, Mimosa, Hinan, and Gakrux, and these are all in order from 1 to 5. She can apply as many of each that she wants onto anything that she wants, but she does need to apply 5. If she's in a 1-on-1, she would apply Imai to her opponent to make them start at 1, and they would have to find the other 4 stars and make contact with them in order for the ability to not take effect. If they don't do this, then something that Kirara has marked with the same star as you will instantly slam into you. Kirara was actually able to abuse this technique by placing the Imai star on Panda and then placing another Imai star on a car, so the car would just be sent flying at Panda over and over. It's a pretty powerful technique, but there's a very clear reason we saw it used in a fight one time. Despite this, Kirara is still a 3rd year at Tokyo Jujutsu Tech and has an amazing ability. She is certainly powerful. Hana Kurusu is another character we would meet during the Culling Game. It was actually the primary person that our sorcerers were searching for, as she was the key to freeing Gojo with her ability to negate all curse techniques. We would formally meet her after she would save Megumi after his fight against Reggie, and she'd tag along with the crew without much resistance because Megumi had actually saved her life when they were children, this causing her to have a crush on him and feel indebted. We see that Hana's actually very kind and patient, as when Yuji was pretty rude to him, she never held it against him and forgave him quite easily. She also just does a lot in the series, considering her very little screen time. Hana finds herself up here because she possesses the supreme ability to neutralize all curse techniques through her Jacob's Ladder. Although most of her strength does originate from her symbiotic relationship with the being referred to as the Angel, she's still pretty competent herself, as she seems to be able to use Jacob's Ladder without much issue, and she was able to nearly kill Sukuna with it at full power. She's not any higher though, because she has a lack of true battle experience as a sorcerer, as it was shown that she could be easily deceived. All in all, Hana does have one of the highest firepower for any sorcerer in the series, but she just doesn't have the mentality. Juzo Kumiya is one of the many combatants in the series that doesn't get too much screen time or much of a showcase in the series. He's also a character that Kenjaku employed as a subordinate, hence is how he got mixed up in this weird story in the first place. We see throughout the story that Juzo's completely insane and sadistic, as all he wants to do is kill people and use their bodies to make hanger racks out of them. He eventually battles Gakuganji to a stalemate and then gets captured by Gojo and then interrogated so they can find more information about the primary antagonist at the time, only to never be seen again, not to anyone's dismay. Juzo, despite his lackluster performance in the series, is actually pretty cool. his decent to okay stats being on the weaker side by the end of the series, and he's actually an insane weapon specialist to a point where he's created tons of cursed tools himself. Maki would even use one of these weapons against her father later in the series, although he ended up destroying it. It was pretty hard to rank him on the list, as it's just said that he's pretty strong and he stalemated Gakuganji, but he's certainly not on the level of those such as Nanami or Mei Mei. Haruta Shigemo is another curse user who was employed by Kenjaku as sort of a disposable grunt, but this guy is far more pesky and annoying than Juzo due to the nature of his ability. Every trait you find in a rat is what you would find in Haruta. Slimy, sadistic, self-preservation over anything, and only looks for the weak opponents to fight, running away at the sight of anybody stronger than him. On top of all this, he is very cunning and intelligent, although he usually plays this clown, cowardly-like character, so he does this to catch people off guard. Thankfully, he meets his end at Sukuna himself, who's so powerful that even a miracle couldn't save Haruta. As I've implied, Haruta's curse technique is literally creating miracles that he is completely unaware of. This technique will erase all small miracles in the memory of them from Haruta's mind and store them as the purple marks under his eyes. Whenever Haruta finds himself in any sort of danger, one of these miracles will be used in order to save him from the situation. Once used, one of the marks under his eyes goes away. This is why he's such a pest in the series. But the chaos of the Shibuya incident would place Haruta in so many life and death situations that he would quickly exhaust his miracle technique and fall victim to Sukuna. Haruta was able to beat Nobara with a few tricks, but he is a sorcerer, so tricks are fair game. Miyo is a goofy yet very intelligent dude who has an obsession with sumo. But to be fair to Miyo, he is an incarnated sorcerer from the past, and in his time period, sumo was a pretty normal hobby to enjoy and engage in for most people. Miyo would accidentally find himself in the Sakurajima colony during the Culling Game saga when he took the wrong direction to get to Tokyo. Eventually, he comes across Maki alongside Daido and Kamo in the middle of a battle with the cursed bear Naoya, and serves as a mentor figure for Maki to clear her mind and access the full strength of her heavenly restriction. Miyo is a pretty difficult character to rank and can be ranked much higher than this, but I decided with the low ball to be safe due to the nature of his appearances and feats in the story. Miyo is the only character I will do this for, so again, he can't be much higher than this. We'd see that within his sumo wrestling simple domain world thing, he was more than able to keep up with Maki's strength and speed. He was also able to land a blow on cursed bear Naoya, although he was fighting 3 other people at the same time. Gege did also imply that Daido was stronger than Miyo through a couple of things, such as how they handle Naoya's domain, so they aren't at the same level. Another reason why I have him down here is because he doesn't really seem to be a fighter anyway. His simple domain is his only ability, and it completely revolves around a sumo match that both he and his opponent must agree to. Strange case, but I do like the guy, so I didn't really want to exclude him. Gakuganji is the principal of Kyoto Jujutsu High, and as one of the higher-ups of Jujutsu Society, he doesn't have an official rank. He's more like a politician in the Jujutsu world if anything. Gakuganji does serve as an antagonist for the political side, alongside the rest of the mysterious higher-ups throughout the series, making plots to assassinate Yuji or just make Gojo's life difficult. But after being tasked with the assassination of Yaga, the principal of Tokyo Jujutsu High, he would actually succeed and have a change of heart after, choosing to fade into the background for the Culling Game saga, and fully come around to helping Gojo and the rest of the students against Sukuna in the final saga of the series. After everything's said and done, he seems to take a leadership position over Jujutsu Society. Gakuganji finds himself here because he definitely needed help to defeat Yaga, but him being unable to defeat Juzo, who didn't seem all that powerful himself, is a decent anti-feat to me. Gakuganji's curse technique is the amplification of sound, in which his body serves as a device to amplify the noise of anything to extreme levels, so he typically uses a guitar to play sounds or music on it and launch these sounds as shockwaves of curse energy. It's kind of dope, and I wish it was in the hands of a more prominent character. All in all, Gakuganji doesn't really seem to be that useful for the position he has in the world, but then again, his position doesn't require much strength. Toge Inumaki is one of the more unique characters in the series, and is probably the first ever case of a massive fan favorite character being underutilized in a shonen manga. Inumaki attends the Tokyo Jujutsu Tech School like the rest of the main cast does, but unlike the cast, he speaks completely in rice ball ingredients. This is because of his curse technique, curse speech, this turning everything he says into a command for whoever hears it to follow. so he does like to play it safe. As you can tell, Inumaki is a very caring person who go to crazy lengths just to ensure the safety of those around him. But he's a bit of a troll at times as well. Inumaki seems to be one of the only characters who can get along with both Yuta and Yuji, as he's able to relate to their situations and having insane powers that are beyond their control at first. He sadly doesn't get much screen time past the Shibuya incident, but he does get to live happily ever after at the end of the story. Inumaki lands himself up here because of his cursed speech ability that turns his commands into reality. He can say stop to freeze his opponents in place in order to prevent them from moving, explode which would literally cause his opponent to explode, or get crushed which would cause someone to squeeze to a point where they're completely flat. The drawback to this ability is the fact that the severity of the skill and the opponents it's used on are completely scaled. For example, Inumaki could tell a random person to walk and they would just walk. But if he tried to use something like stop on an opponent as powerful as Sukuna, he would suffer severe damage. Inumaki is also a pretty competent sorcerer too, as he is a semi-grade 1 sorcerer, but we just haven't seen enough to place him any higher. Gerald Aasaka is a curse user from all the way back in Gojo's youth. He has taken the lives of many for money, and he would even brutally torture them for the sake of his own enjoyment. This would all come to an end when a child Gojo would make his presence known to him. He would retire on the spot and go into hiding until Gojo would find himself sealed by Kenjaku, since he believed that with Gojo gone, he can live his life freely as a curse user once more. He fights Yuji and Megumi to prevent them from freeing Gojo, and he's quickly defeated by the two sorcerers. We don't really know what happens to him after. Aasaka is a pretty powerful and tricky sorcerer, as he's able to engage in physical combat with both Yuji and Megumi through combining his skill with his pretty broken inverse curse technique. Inverse is a curse technique that inverts the damage of the attacks that Aasaka receives. The stronger they are, the less damage they do to him, and vice versa. This ability can also be turned off and on at any moment in order to confuse the opponent. Aasaka can also reinforce himself with curse energy on top of this to even mitigate more damage that he takes. There is a limit to how much damage the technique can block, but Aasaka uses it with so much finesse that he's usually able to survive anything. Ogi Zenin is a special grade 1 sorcerer who hails from the esteemed Zenin family. He's extremely traditional in the greatest sense and despises his own children for being weak and untalented in comparison to his brother Naobito. In fact, he considers this to be the primary reason he was never named the head of the Zenin clan. When Maki and Mai would both return to the Zenin clan to reach their storage of cursed tools, Ogi would intercept them and cut them both down as he considered them to be stains on his legacy. This would cause Mai to sacrifice herself in order to let Maki tap into her true potential and to obtain the soul-splitting katana. Maki then cuts him down instantly soon after, ending his story. Ogi is a special grade 1 sorcerer, which is kind of an empty title, but it's there. He considered himself to be an equal to Naobito, but Gege himself would eventually confirm that they aren't really close in strength, hence is why he's down here. Ogi's only real feat is defeating Maki, who was decently powerful after the Shibuya incident, but getting curb stomped by the complete heavenly restriction Maki. Naoya was able to put up a decent fight against this very same Maki, so yeah, what Gege said makes sense. Ogi is weaker than it initially seemed despite his statement. Ogi's curse technique is Blazing Courage. This is a curse technique that lets him emit flames from his blade to reinforce the powers of his strikes. Not only this, but he has access to Falling Blossom Emotion. Although this is typically used to combat domain expansions, Ogi uses it to force his blade to automatically cut anything that enters into the radius of this technique. Ogi's got kind of a bag, but he's too much of a bum for me to place him any higher. Kento Nanami is the first true grade 1 sorcerer to make this list. Nanami is one of the first characters we meet in the Tokyo Jujutsu High faculty, and he serves as Yuji's primary mentor figure throughout the series of Jujutsu Kaisen. Albeit a bit strict, yet indifferent at first, we eventually find out that this behavior primarily stems from his past and the loss of a very close friend of his, and also drives him to become someone who can help and save as many people as possible. Many characters either look up to or respect Nanami for his character, attitude, and diligence. Nanami is said to be the grade 1 sorcerer that everyone should be. He's very powerful enough to combat the special grade curses on the lower end, and somewhat be able to hold his own against the more powerful ones in a group setting. So, he's strong himself. Nanami has the curse technique of Ratio, which would divide his opponents with 10 lines and create an area where he can land a critical hit on his opponent at the ratio point of 7 to 3. Nanami can also place this technique on a specific part of somebody like their arm or leg in order to condense the technique's range if he so chooses. The primary reason this technique is so powerful is because it allows Nanami to combat those stronger than him, as he can massively weaken their defenses with the ratio technique. Nanami typically uses this in conjunction with his blade. Nanami also has access to the Black Flash, which is a spatial distortion that is generated when a cursed energy user connects an impact of cursed energy within 1/1,000,000th of a physical hit, causing their cursed energy to flash black and reinforce their attack to the power of 2.5 the strength it normally is. Since Nanami is the character to hold the record of the most uses of it in a row until the final saga of the story, we can assume that him using this technique in battle is likely compared to most, so I'm gonna place it in his bag. Nanami overall is a well-balanced and powerful sorcerer with a good bag of abilities that allows him to put up a fight against almost anybody. After Nanami, we have Reggie Star. This is our first questionable pick when it comes to the terms of being a Jujutsu sorcerer on this list, but since he was never classified as a curse user and the wiki lists him as a Jujutsu sorcerer, I'm just gonna put him on here. Reggie Star is a participant and an incarnated sorcerer of the Culling Game. He's the main antagonist of Megumi's side of Tokyo Colony No. 1. He's a very intelligent yet charismatic character, and he's sort of a ringleader for a small gang of sorcerers in Tokyo Colony No. 1. Reggie was even intelligent enough to figure out that there was a greater purpose behind the creation of the Culling Game, but due to Megumi's bad emotional state at the time, they weren't really able to negotiate and they went straight into battle, although Reggie and Megumi had the same end goal of stopping Kenjaku, but with their own methods. After a pretty close fight, Reggie would meet his end and curse Megumi, telling him to let fate toy with him and then die like a fool. Reggie Star, despite losing his only fight in the series, was a very powerful combatant with a pretty big bag. In his battle against Megumi, Reggie was shown at one point to be able to withstand Max Elephant's weight on his body, which is certainly a couple of tons, and go back and forth with the Jujutsu Sorcerer over a very long fight. He seems roughly on par with him. Where Reggie really shows his strength is in the versatility of his curse technique, which is contractual recreation. This curse technique allows him to burn any physical contract like a receipt with his curse energy, and make whatever was on the contract come into existence. If you thought this wasn't flexible enough, he can heal himself by burning a receipt with a massage treatment on it. This will result in him instantly obtaining the results of the massage and just his body instantly being relaxed again. He's extremely broken. He can also combat domain expansions with the Hollow Wicker Basket technique if necessary. Reggie, despite not being special grade level, is very impressive and has arguably the most flexible technique in the series. Granted, you're willing to wear this stupid outfit in order to carry around all those receipts. After Reggie Star, we've got Megumi Fushiguro, the deuteragonist of the series. Megumi is very stoic and calculating, much like Megumi, all the while being more open to engaging with Yuji's nonsense, as they're best friends after all. Megumi is very prevalent throughout majority of Jujutsu Kaisen, but takes a backseat when possessed by Sukuna after his soul was at its weakest. From there on, all sorcerers make it except Kashimo to make it their priority in order to liberate him from Sukuna, which they eventually do. Megumi is also the child of the sorcerer killer Toge Zenin and the mentee of Satoru Gojo. Lastly, I think it's important to mention that he is the leader of the mostly eradicated Zenin clan. Megumi, like Reggie, has one of the most versatile curse techniques in the series in the form of the 10 Shadows. This allows him to summon multiple different Shikigami that all serve a different purpose, with the most powerful of all being Mahoraga, a monstrous being that's able to even combat Gojo and Sukuna, while boasting the ability to gradually adapt to any and all phenomena in order to counter and gain immunity to it. Megumi falls down here because he actually doesn't have control of Mahoraga and only has control over 5 out of the 10 Shikigami currently. Megumi also has the incomplete domain expansion that allows him to boost the strength of his curse technique and create multiple clones of himself or his Shikigami. There's no short hit effect to the domain expansion, and it was never completed in story, so we don't know its true potential. With that said, Megumi is the character everybody knows for being someone who never lived up to his foreshadow potential, but despite this, he's still a pretty powerful character in the grand scheme of things. Noritoshi Kamo is another semi-grade 1 sorcerer from Kyoto Tech who's extremely similar to Megumi in terms of their position in the world as members and leaders of their clans. Whereas Megumi was set to lead the Zenin clan due to the possession of the 10 Shadows, Noritoshi was set to lead the Kamo clan due to his possession of blood manipulation. Noritoshi was a very stoic character who felt like he had to be the mouthpiece for the Kamo clan and their values at first, and slowly loosened up as he engaged with the caste and the world fell apart. Once his ancestor Kenjaku took over the Kamo clan and exiled him from it, he no longer had the burden of the Kamo clan on his shoulders, but he also saw no value in his life, as it was his life goal to eventually make the Kamo clan a place his mother could return to, as the clan exiled her from it when he was very little. After almost sacrificing himself for the sake of defeating Naoya, Maki urges him to just reunite with his mother instead of moping about his circumstances, and he does that, pretty much retiring as a sorcerer after. Kamo has some pretty good stats, as he was able to fight against the strongest cursed bear in the series, Naoya, for a pretty long time completely solo. His blood manipulation curse technique is also one of the best in the series. It allows him to manipulate blood to an extremely high level. He can increase his body's temperature, pulse, and blood cells with the flowing red scale technique to massively increase his physical stats, use his blood to shoot a massive beam out of his hands that moves at the speed of sound, or create weapons out of it. Blood manipulation, of course, requires the user's blood for it to be used, so they typically carry bags of their own blood so they aren't completely draining themselves of blood through using the technique non-stop. Kamo himself is at such a high level with this technique that he can circulate blood he's used for his techniques back into his body. Kamo surprisingly finds himself higher than Megumi on this list because I can't really see any character below him lasting more than 5 seconds against Naoya alone, or even weaker special grade curses than him. Noritoshi is overall way more impressive than most people think he is. After Noritoshi comes what is possibly the hottest take in this entire video, but I have Iori Hazenoki. Hazenoki is another character we'd meet at the same time as Reggie Star during Megumi's side of Tokyo Colony No. 1 in the Culling Game saga. He apparently worked alongside Reggie to prepare for whatever Kenjaku was planning, hence is why he fought Takaba. But once hearing Reggie passed away, he kinda just gave up fighting Takaba and went to do his own thing for a while. We eventually see him during the final arc of Jujutsu Kaisen, where he finds Kenjaku in the Lake Gosho colony and they engage in battle after a pretty long conversation, this battle ending with Kenjaku easily defeating the sorcerer. I place Hazenoki pretty high on this list because Reggie seems to imply that Hazenoki is more powerful than him, as he suggests that Hazenoki can kill anybody who pisses him off enough to completely cut loose. Not only this, but the firepower behind his ability is insanely high, as it allows him to remove any part of his flesh in order to throw and generate explosions with them. We see him typically rip out his eyes and teeth to use as ammunition, and if he's able to constantly use this ability, we know that he has access to some pretty good reverse curse technique. Not many people notice this, but considering how exhausting reverse curse technique can be, it's very impressive how many times we see Hazenoki utilize it without ever showing a single sign of fatigue ever. And reverse curse technique is a big deal in this series, as it gives sorcerers more chances than the average sorcerer in a battle. All in all, I think Hazenoki is a pretty underrated sorcerer and deserves his spot on the list. Takuma Ino is a grade 2 sorcerer who works for Tokyo Jujutsu High as a sorcerer who takes on missions. Despite his rank, do not let him fool you. This guy has the greatest comeback in all of Jujutsu Kaisen, and deservedly so, as he's nothing but a pretty kind dude who loves to impress his mentors and look out for his juniors. He's another student of Nanami's like Yuji, and the reason he's only grade 2 is because he wanted Nanami's approval to become a grade 1 sorcerer, but Nanami passed away. Ino isn't really a character with too many appearances, and his biggest moment is getting curb stomped by Toge Zenin, but he gets his shine in the final arc against Sukuna, where he is present for a majority of the battle, and assists the stronger sorcerers multiple times by helping them land attacks on Sukuna, or just distracting Sukuna himself. Ino manages to make it out of the carnage alive, and apparently spends the rest of his days as a sorcerer. Ino is a character with a pretty huge bag and great feats. Ino was shown to hold his own in the Sukuna raid along characters such as Choso, Kusakabe, Yuji, Higuruma, Maki, and so many more, which is already indicative of top tier level. On top of this, he has a pretty flexible curse technique in the form of auspicious beast summonings. This allows Ino to summon 4 auspicious beasts and use their abilities in battle. One allows him to shoot a powerful horn that will track onto its target, another covers his body in water to use as a cushion and increases mobility, the third allows him to nullify his own pain at the cost of immobilizing him for a while, and the last creates a massive dragon that will change its target in battle until it's defeated. On top of this, Ino has access to reverse curse technique in simple domain through switch training, and he possesses Nanami's blade as he inherited it after Nanami passed away. This blade was imbued with Nanami's ratio technique as well, giving Ino the ability to land critical strikes when using it. Ino, from my perspective, is another pretty underrated character with a deep bag that not many talk about or even recognize. Laru is a pretty interesting sorcerer who was initially one of Geto's commanders and was willing to do anything to make him king. But after his death in the series, he would go his own way and work with Yuki Tsukumo behind the scenes of the story. In fact, he was the one to tell her what was happening during the Shibuya incident. Laru has a pretty standout appearance as he's always shirtless with 2 hearts on his chest, and he's a pretty standout character because he appears so little in the story, but he has so many good moments, as he's the one to prevent all of his fellow commanders from fighting against each other, or when he would paralyze Sukuna before retreating, just to give Yuji the chance to land his Black Flash and awaken. He's a pretty cool character, and thankfully, he manages to survive the final battle alongside Miguel. Laru is very powerful as he was able to directly engage Sukuna in battle and come out alive. He even ate a Black Flash from the King of Curses, although that was what took him out the battle. This alone does show that he has pretty good feats though. LaRue also has a pretty flexible curse technique in the form of heart catch, this allowing him to create a massive hand that just serves as something that can strike, catch, throw, or whatever. It's just a big hand he can use to fight his opponents. If this hand is destroyed, 1/10 of the damage suffered from the hand will be transferred to his body. If LaRue does manage to grab somebody with this hand, he can activate Cutie Honey. Cutie Honey is an ability that will force his opponent to concentrate every ounce of their attention onto him for a brief period of time, making this a great ability when used alongside teammates, as it will give them a free hit. LaRue is very flexible, powerful, and all-rounded, and that gets him high on the list. Mei Mei is another grade 1 sorcerer in the series that everybody praises as very powerful. Even Gojo, at the peak of his arrogance as a teenager, was confused at the thought of Mei Mei not being able to finish a mission quick. Besides this, Mei Mei values money above all else, and only Wee Wee, her younger brother, is the person she values above money. Besides this, she is a very kind person. She was even one of the few sorcerers who defended Maki's presence in the world of Jujutsu sorcery and advocated for her to finally receive a promotion. She does some questionable stuff in the series, but most of her actions do prove her allegiance to the main cast. She was even the one to assassinate the clan head of the new Shadow Style school, since they slowly drained the life force of her brother. But this would also have a massive effect on the world of Jujutsu, as it would allow every sorcerer to learn the new Shadow Style under Kusakabe. We don't really get to see Mei Mei much, but all of her appearances are memorable. Mei Mei, being a grade 1 sorcerer, was certainly going to find herself high on the power scale of Jujutsu Kaisen. She typically wields a massive battle axe with tons of finesse and speed, which shows both her physical strength and skill as a combatant. On top of this, we see that Mei Mei is always calm and analytical in battle, even when her back's completely against the wall, which is important in a series like this, as most fights are decided by brain and strategy. On top of this, Mei Mei has the cursed technique of crow manipulation. She can manipulate tons of crows all at once while sharing their vision. This makes her recon skill almost unparalleled. On top of this, she created a technique that allows her to use a binding vow on one of the birds that she can control with her cursed energy. And what this binding vow does is exchange the bird's life in order to have it launch itself toward her opponent with massive amounts of cursed energy. This attack is so powerful that Mei Mei would try it on both Gojo and Sukuna, and they would both avoid taking the attack at all costs. This is notably impressive for Sukuna, as Sukuna typically allows himself to be ragdolled for a majority of his fights. Another grade 1 sorcerer on the list is the self-proclaimed 530,000 IQ genius, Aoi Todo. Todo is a character who steals the show with each of his appearances, as he's someone who cannot stand sitting still. He typically asks people what kind of girls they like in order to get a decent read on them, and depending on the answer, he may either beat the hell out of them or see them as an invaluable brother he must protect by any means necessary. He's also a pupil of Yuki Tsukumo, who's a special grade sorcerer, and he also serves as a mentor to Yuji for the Goodwill event, teaching him how to use the Black Flash. After his participation in the Shibuya incident, he goes missing until the final battle in the series against Sukuna, in which he and Yuji team up one last time towards the end. Todo's greatest asset in battle is his mind. Todo's a character who can take any situation and make it much better or worse if he pleases. His mentorship is one that has allowed Yuji to make massive jumps in power, and when it comes to battle, he's always able to understand his opponents and generate strategies around them and their techniques almost instantly. His understanding of Jujutsu is unparalleled for those in his age group. On top of this, Todo is almost as naturally physically powerful and fast as Yuji is, while talented enough to use the Black Flash, Simple Domain, and Binding Vows. Lastly, Todo has the cursed technique of Boogie Woogie, this allowing him to swap the positions of anything with cursed energy if he manages to create a clap with his hands. He can even do this off of clapping his hand with someone else's hand if he pleases. After losing one of his hands, he makes another binding vow with an instrument called the Vibra Slap, and for each time the Vibra Slap plays, Boogie Woogie will activate, this allowing him to swap up to 50 times per second. Kokichi Muta, also known as Mekamaru, is a character who was born with a heavenly restriction that would make most of his body practically useless and just overall terrible to live in, to a point where he can't even be in the sunlight or he'd feel like his entire body was being stabbed. This would force him to constantly wrap his body in bandages and seclude himself in a cave connected to tubes just to stay alive. In exchange for this horrible heavenly restriction, he'd be blessed with a pretty powerful curse technique that allows him to manipulate puppets to an insane range. So he typically operates as a semi-grade 1 Kyoto Jujutsu High sorcerer through his puppets, primarily Ultimate Mekamaru, this being a mechanical cursed corpse with tons of powers and abilities. It would eventually be revealed that he was working as a mole for Mahito and Kenjaku in exchange of Mahito completely healing him of his sickness and making his body normal. After this deal was completed, he would turn on them too, only to be killed off by Mahito and just never be seen again. Mechamaru, despite his losing record, is extremely powerful in his absolute state. This is the strongest puppet in Mechamaru's possession, and it uses years of curse energy that he has saved up in each of its attacks to do crazy amounts of damage. This machine was so powerful that it even allowed him to battle Mahito alone for a good amount of time, which is a feat in itself when we're talking about someone who can win by simply touching you. Given its nature, Absolute Mechamaru is extremely powerful and can maybe even be higher than this, but since we've only seen it once in battle, it's very difficult to tell. Masamichi Yaga is the principal of Tokyo Jujutsu High for the first half of the story, and was a confirmed grade 1 sorcerer even before becoming principal, as he was Gojo, Geto, and Shoko's teacher when they were children. Yaga was a very stern man, but certainly one of a great character, as he was the only person apparently able to command both Geto and Gojo without much issue in Tokyo Jujutsu High. Yaga is also extremely talented when it comes to Jujutsu, as he was the first and only man in history to create fully independent cursed corpses like Panda. When creating Panda, he had been restrained by the higher-ups of Jujutsu Society because he could simply create his own army of limitless cursed corpses that can operate completely on their own, but he would lie to them and say that Panda was no more than a miracle. Had he lied, he would have been designated a special grade sorcerer. Yaga would make many sacrifices throughout the series, such as exposing his secret of being able to create cursed corpses to Kusakabe in order to help his sister cope with the loss of her child, and he put his soul into a cursed corpse, allowing them to reunite once more. And he would even die to keep the secret and prevent the higher-ups from learning of how he created these cursed corpses. He did end up telling Gakuganji, but Gakuganji chose to keep the secret to himself for the greater good. Yaga was again a grade 1 sorcerer who would have been a special grade had he not lied about his true level of skill as a sorcerer, so he's definitely powerful. His curse technique is to infuse dolls he creates with cursed energy so he can bring them to life and manipulate them. Although he was able to take this a step further by creating cursed corpses that are completely self-sufficient and do not require his help to live and exist on their own. We know that Yaga has tons of cursed corpses that he can actually control and manipulate if he pleased, so he's more than capable of holding his own against powerful people. As for his execution, I think just given the nature of Jujutsu Society and how he's handled things in the past, I think he more accepted his fate and didn't really try to fight back, so I placed him here. Kusakabe is another grade 1 sorcerer and member of staff at Tokyo Jujutsu Tech. When we first introduced to him during the Shibuya incident, he makes himself out to be some kind of coward that avoids fighting at all costs. But as the story progresses, we see exactly why he behaves the way that he does. Kusakabe is a man who will only fight at his best when he feels like he's the only person left to protect others, and he's typically very reckless when fighting like this. It's clear that he's truly selfless when it actually matters, and not when someone like Gojo's present. Kusakabe is also pretty kind and one of the more reliable characters in the story to many of his grade 1 peers, as when they were asked about him, they all said nothing but good things about the man, with Mei Mei even referring to him as a Swiss Army knife. Kusakabe is not only powerful, as he was able to handle Sukuna in a one-on-one for a decent amount of time, but he's also a master of the simple domain and has created multiple techniques surrounding it. He has the ability to cast his simple domain in order to weaken any cursed techniques that may enter it and hit him, but he can use the simple domain to instantly slash anything that enters its range with the Bato sword drawing, or use Evening Moon sword drawing to intercept the attack. Kusakabe's most powerful technique with the simple domain is where he uses Bato sword drawing, while expanding his simple domain at such a massive range that it reaches his target. This results in multiple slashes being instantly sent at them before they can even react. Keep in mind, Kusakabe can use this in someone's domain expansion to potentially cut them down before they can even activate their sure hit effect. He's that guy, and he can possibly be higher on this list. After the kindest sorcerer, we have the worst of them all, the spoiled brat in special grade 1, Naoya Zenin. Now this coverage of Naoya will only go over his human self and not the cursed spirit that isn't actually him. Naoya was the man who was going to inherit the Zenin clan under normal circumstances, but Megumi took over due to a behind-the-scenes deal with his father and Megumi's father. This would bring him into the story as a man who's seeking to take Megumi's head so the clan would be passed over to him. But Choso prevents him from making any progress on his first attempt, and then Maki beats him into the ground when she massacred the entire Zenin clan. Naoya is a pretty big scumbag with a cool ability, and surprisingly, he's pretty popular in the fandom despite this. Naoya was the head of the Hei, which is like the special forces of the Zenin clan. Naoya was also able to have battles against Choso and Maki, although he would lose to both of them. He still put up a good performance. Gojo did exclude the Zenin clan when it came to speaking about the strongest grade 1 sorcerer too, so I'm sure that was for a reason. Naoya has the curse technique of projection sorcery, this allowing him to plot out the next 24 actions he's gonna take and being able to take all of those actions in the span of 1 second. This allows Naoya to massively increase his speed as he's able to do 24 separate actions in the span of a second. Of course, Naoya has to make it realistic too. He can't say he traveled to Africa in 24 actions. It has to be something you can realistically do in 24 separate instances of movement, such as walking down the street, but instead of walking down the street in 2 minutes, you walk down the street in the span of a second. Now imagine applying this ability in a combat sense. On top of this, if the user of the technique touches their opponent, the opponent has to trace their next 24 movements or they'll be frozen and completely vulnerable in an animation frame for 1 second. It's a very powerful ability that's prized like the 10 shadows and blood manipulation for a reason, and this is what makes Naoya such a threat. Now Naoya's father, Special Grade 1 Naobito, comes next. Naobito is similar to Naoya, but less of a scumbag as he's never really gone out of his way to try to assassinate anybody in his way or anything like that. He just got a massive ego as the head of the Zenin clan and is either talking a lot of trash, drinking, or just ignoring whatever problem he doesn't deem to be on his level. We see that despite this behavior, he doesn't let his pride be his undoing, as he even worked with Toji, someone he deemed inferior, in order to defeat Dagon. Shortly after this battle though, Jogo would finish Naobito off, ending his life there. Naobito versus Naoya has been an endless debate in the community, but I personally think that Naobito has a slight edge over his child due to his experience as a sorcerer, and Naobito has better feats of being able to understand a situation and act accordingly. Whereas Naoya's fights center around him already underestimating his opponents and understanding their techniques and weaknesses and still losing. Naobito fought against Dagon alongside Nanami and Maki and adapted to each of Dagon's attacks and surprises. Naobito also sports the same exact curse technique as Naoya, so there's no point in going over it again. He also has Falling Blossom Emotion, which allows him to defend himself against any domain expansion. Hagane Daido is another incarnated sorcerer we would meet in the Culling Game saga. Daido appears at the same time that Miyo does, and he helps Maki fight against Naoya because she gave him a sword. Daido, being from an era where swordplay was intertwined with the soul of a man, found himself confused and heartbroken when he was brought into the modern era where swords were illegal. So Maki did him a huge favor by lending him the sword. Daido is an extremely unique case where he can't even use curse energy, but has the ability to contend with Jujutsu sorcerers and curses alike due to his extremely sharp senses and his unparalleled swordplay. Daido serves as a mentor to Maki through helping her understand her senses a bit more, and they split paths after the final battle against Sukuna, where they vowed to fight against each other in the future. Daido is extremely powerful, and can reasonably find himself even higher on the list. But we don't see him fight much either. We see that when he first holds a blade, everybody in the area is absolutely shook at the amount of bloodlust that he was able to emit, even the cursed spirit Naoya himself. And then he was able to cut Naoya a few times in their battle and withstand the effects of his domain expansion despite it doing tons of damage to him. Daido is probably the only character who doesn't engage with the power system of Jujutsu Kaisen at all, yet can hang with everybody else, which is why he's so notable to me. Druv is an extremely powerful yet underrated character due to the nature of his presence in the story, in which he had almost none. All we know about Druv is that he was able to single-handedly conquer the entire Japanese archipelago during the Civil War of Wa in the history of Jujutsu Kaisen's world, and that he was strong enough to engage in a four-way deadlock between the Sendai colony, which was full of very powerful sorcerers. Druv is actually a character who was able to incarnate himself once before Kenjaku would incarnate him into the Culling Game, which is pretty interesting because it was said that this is something that only Sukuna and Kenjaku can do. Lastly, he's a very brutal person compared to most players in the Culling Game, as he just attacked everybody that he saw, which is why Yuta decided to put him down first. Druv is certainly powerful as again, he was in a four-way deadlock alongside characters such as Ryu Ishigori and Uro Takako. Not only this, but he probably has the only curse technique in the series that can directly counter Gojo's Infinity Barrier. This technique is unnamed, but basically, he can create Shikigami and send them in whatever path he wants. If they orbit someone or something, a mini domain is created around them with an effect of them receiving slashes from the attack. This is quite powerful, as Druv does not actually need to make contact with his opponents in order to actually damage them, and in fact, nothing can really defend against this attack. I just wish that he wasn't off screen, but it makes sense as Yuta did not care to question him like he did the others. Takako Uro is another sorcerer that Yuta would have to face from the Sendai colony. She was another contestant in the Culling Game and was filled with rage from her previous life, since she was falsely accused and sentenced to death for a crime that she didn't really do and by people she was loyal to. Yuta has a hard time getting through to her, as he's a direct descendant of those same people who betrayed her and she despises him for it. Uro is also someone who wouldn't target any non-sorcerers in the Culling Game, not because she deems them innocent or she's being nice, but because of a pride thing. She only wants to take down other sorcerers. After her fight with Yuta, she transfers her points over to him and goes into hiding once Sukuna appears into the Sendai colony to never be seen again. Uro is a very powerful sorcerer, as she was once the leader of an elite assassin group in the Heian era, which was the golden era of history. Not only this, but she was one of the highest scoring characters in the Culling Game while restricting herself and fighting in the most powerful colony, which was Sendai. As she's able to combat Ryu and Yuta Okkotsu, she's certainly on the stronger side of the cast. Uro has the curse technique of sky manipulation, allowing her to grab the atmosphere around her as if it were a cloak. Essentially, she can manipulate the space around her body in all sorts of ways. She can distort it in order to defend herself against all sorts of attacks, or she can shatter the surface of the space she manipulates on top of her opponents to hit them with the impact of the shattered space. Similar to Panda's drumming beat, it's an unblockable attack. Uro also has a domain expansion, but we've never seen it in action. Ryu Ishigori is the final sorcerer we meet from the Sendai colony, and interestingly enough, he was a pretty cool guy who only incarnated into the game just to find a worthy opponent, one who can satisfy him unlike any opponent ever has. In his previous life, he was the strongest sorcerer around and pretty much had everything he's ever wanted except for a good fight. So here he is. He was another character who wouldn't target innocents, but unlike Uro, he didn't really care if they got caught up in his attacks, so Yuta took his time with fighting him as well. Overall, Ryu serves as the primary antagonist of the Sendai Colony Battle Royale that concludes with his loss against Yuta and him forfeiting his points after. Soon after this, Sukuna enters Sendai and cuts Ryu down almost instantly, ending his story there. Ryu is an extremely powerful sorcerer who's able to fight on par with characters such as Yuta and Uro. He even boasts the highest curse energy output of all the characters in the Culling Game, hence is why it seems as if he's invulnerable to majority of the attacks sent his way. And most of the damage done to him was by the technique that literally shatters space on top of you, or his redirected curse energy beam cannons. Ryu's curse technique is curse energy discharge, and it seems to be a passive technique that allows Ryu to shoot massive and powerful blasts of curse energy towards his opponents. And this technique also grants Ryu the benefit of being the only sorcerer in the series who does not need to have his own curse technique activated for it to be used. So in other words, Ryu cannot go into a cooldown state unlike everybody else who can actually exhaust their curse techniques. Lastly, Ryu has access to a domain expansion, but it was never seen before, so we don't know its true capacity. Hiromi Higuruma is a fan-favorite character in Jujutsu Kaisen who was first a defense attorney who took on near-impossible cases to protect those who were falsely accused, as Japan has a 99% conviction rate and a lot of those convictions tend to be incorrect. At the end of a trial that was taking place around the Culling Game, he witnesses another wrongful conviction in the face of the man he failed to defend. This pushes him to reach his breaking point with the unfair justice system, so he awakens a curse technique and slaughters everybody in that room, entering himself into the Culling Game. Higuruma serves as the primary antagonist of Yuji's side of Tokyo Colony No. 1, and he almost defeats Yuji, but gives up due to Yuji taking responsibility for the Shibuya incident despite his innocence. This shattering Higuruma emotionally, as he was about to cut down the very people he's always wanted to protect. Higuruma eventually joins the cause to take down Sukuna and plays a massive role in this long battle, although he is one of the first to be defeated and retired. Despite his defeat, he survives and turns himself for the massacre he committed, only to find out that Jujutsu Society bailed him out because they really want him to work for them and they have a lot of power in the government. Higuruma is someone who's talented at everything he tries, including sorcery. He reached the level of a grade 1 sorcerer in 12 days and completely dominated Tokyo Colony No. 1. Matter of fact, Higuruma was the only modern sorcerer that Kenjaku was interested in and looking out for in the final saga, as the story would even state that he is the only man on par with Gojo in terms of pure talent. Higuruma's primary curse technique is deadly sentencing, which automatically generates a courtroom domain expansion where both combatants are placed on separate podiums. No combat is allowed in the domain expansion, and instead, Higuruma acts as a prosecutor, whereas his opponent is the defendant in a courtroom, while his Shikigami that sits behind him, Judgment, knows everything about everybody who's in the courtroom. The domain expansion plays out like a court case, and where evidence is submitted to Higuruma to be evaluated, and Judgment yells out whatever the defendant is being accused of. Higuruma is to make an argument with the evidence provided, defendant, while the defendant has to prove their innocence. If Higuruma proves that the client is guilty, the punishment that judgment will give depends on the severity of the crime. Usually the bare minimum is confiscation, in which judgment will remove the defendant's curse technique or curse energy if the defendant doesn't have a curse technique in the first place. If the accused crime is real bad, it can result in the death penalty, in which Higuruma will gain the Executioner's Blade. This is where his gavel will change into a glowing blade that will take the life of anybody it makes contact with. On top of this insanely broken domain expansion, Higuruma has access to domain amplification, allowing him to cast an aura that can neutralize curse techniques, reverse curse technique, allowing him to regenerate from any damage sustained, and insanely high Jujutsu proficiency, as again, he was even compared to Gojo. Higuruma is insanely powerful, and his final battle against Sukuna proves that. Miguel is a character who is famously known for getting a massively one-sided beatdown from Gojo back in Jujutsu Kaisen 0. Besides this, Miguel is an African sorcerer who worked for Geto back in Jujutsu Kaisen 0 in order to help him achieve his dream, but he would leave the group after he passed away. Miguel would then return to take on Sukuna alongside LaRue and everybody else in order to honor Geto's life, only under the condition that Sukuna could not activate his domain expansion. Once this was fulfilled, Miguel and LaRue fought until LaRue suffered a critical injury, and the two retreated from the battle, showing up once it was over. All the sorcerers were pretty mad at him, as things could have gone much smoother had he appeared at the beginning of the battle instead of when everybody was down. Miguel is extremely powerful, as he would see tons of praise from both Sukuna and Gojo after fighting the two sorcerers. Gojo would even be so impressed that he chose Miguel of all people to be the one to train Yuta Okkotsu after meeting him in their one fight. And Gojo being Gojo, probably didn't give Miguel much of a choice. Sukuna also expresses interest in Miguel as he's able to bob and weave through all of Sukuna's attacks quite easily, and he leaves his battle against Sukuna with no damage sustained whatsoever, despite engaging in direct hand-to-hand combat with the King of Curses. Miguel is unbelievably impressive every time he shows up, as even taking that beatdown from Gojo is still very impressive. Keep in mind, the majority of the cast cannot even take one punch from the sorcerer. Miguel's curse technique is Prayer Song, which is one that allows him to simply buff his own stats while debuffing his opponent's stats through dancing while fighting. Miguel, despite being sort of a comedic character, really does impress when you examine what he's done. Suguru Geto is the first official special grade sorcerer we'll be covering on the list. Suguru was Gojo's best friend and Yaga's student in the past, but after the events of the Hidden Inventory arc, he would enter a downward spiral that would lead into him massacring a village of non-sorcerers and abandoning Jujutsu High, becoming a curse user. He meets his end during Jujutsu Kaisen 0 at the hands of Gojo after being defeated by Yuta. Geto was initially a pretty stern and serious student who would engage with Gojo's nonsense or fight with him every so often, but in the present time of the story, he was a cult leader who despised non-sorcerers so much that he would refer to them as monkeys. His goal was to completely exterminate all non-sorcerers for the sake of a world that would be led by sorcerers and sorcerers alone. Suguru Geto was an incredibly well-rounded combatant with one of the most powerful curse techniques in the series. First, Suguru was more than capable of close quarters combat unlike most Shikigami users, as he was able to combat both Yuta and Rika at the same time while wielding the Playful Cloud. On top of this, Suguru has access to curse spirit manipulation, this allowing him to control cursed spirits after defeating them and turning them into these horrible tasting black orbs that he must eat. Once this is completed, he can summon the cursed spirit as a familiar to fight alongside him in battle. There is no limit to how many he can summon at once. There's also a maximum technique to this curse technique that allows Geto to combine whatever amount of curses he sees fit into a single powerful blast. Geto certainly lives up to his position as a special grade sorcerer, and I don't really give him flack for not having a domain expansion, as he could always just have one of his 4,000 cursed spirits sit outside of the domain and shatter the barrier if he so pleases. Toge and Maki Zenin are the two characters who sit right above Geto on the list. The story outright states that the two are equals, so who am I to say otherwise? If you want, you can place Toge a little above Maki, as he's more of a strategic coward and experienced when it comes to battle, but to save me the trouble, I'm throwing them in the same spot. Maki is the twin sister of Mei Zenin and is someone who serves as a tough older sister to our main trio in the series. She's typically cold to those she meets at first, but she warms up to almost everybody in the cast except Hakkari and is willing to put her life on the line for them. Although Maki was relatively one of the weaker characters in the first half of the series, after her sister passes away, the limitation on her heavenly restriction would be removed and she would go out to easily slaughter the entire Zenin clan. This removal also allowed her to finally reach the strength that she should have always been at, and after some mentorship in the Sakurajima colony, Maki's strength would skyrocket one last time. She plays a pretty big role in the final arc as one of the heavy hitters of Tokyo Jujutsu High that was set to battle Sukuna, and she holds her own for many chapters. She is eventually removed from the battle once Sukuna lands a direct dismantle on her, but she survives the story as Yuji was able to close out the fight for everybody. We see that like all the other students, she gets a happy ending and gets to live happily ever after. Toji, on the other hand, seems to live a life that contrasts Maki. Despite also being treated like trash by the Zenin clan and all of that due to possessing no curse technique and only has the same heavenly restriction that Maki has, Toji eventually leaves the clan as an adult and bears a child with the mother of Megumi, adopting the last name of Fushiguro while doing so. Toji Fushiguro would eventually lose this woman that gave his life meaning and abandon both Megumi and his stepdaughter Sumiki, which just kind of led into a downward spiral from there. He eventually takes a mission that involves Satoru Gojo, and due to his lifelong insecurity stemming from the Zenin clan's disapproval of his heavenly restriction, he'd continue fighting Gojo even after his mission was complete, just to prove that even the greatest sorcerer of the modern era is beneath him, which would by proxy force all sorcerers including the Zenin clan to acknowledge this. Most people know the stories of these two, but there's a brief recap for those who forgot a few details or something. Maki and Toji both possess the heavenly restriction that trades all of their cursed energy and aptitude for it in exchange for reinforcing their physical bodies to insane levels. They're like Rock Lee if he was in JJK. This trade-off is insanely beneficial to these two characters, as they're able to dog walk pretty much everybody in the cast who isn't some super talented sorcerer or someone who's been fighting every day of their lives since they were 3 years old. The two sorcerers also have wielded the Soul Split Katana, which allows them to slice through anything with a soul like it's butter, while also damaging the soul itself. Characters who are not completely aware of the shape of their soul cannot regenerate from these slashes if they somehow survive it, which is almost everybody. Toji has also once possessed the Inverted Spear of Heaven, which allows him to negate any cursed technique it makes contact with. These two characters are certainly powerful, but their primary weakness comes from their inability to regenerate as fast as most can with reverse curse technique. So if an opponent lands a pretty good shot on them, they usually have to take a break, or they're out the fight. Now we move on to the Frozen Star, Uraume. Uraume was originally a boy that Sukuna adopted and raised due to his ice-based curse technique, which would allow Sukuna to store food for longer. Yes, he was literally Sukuna's fridge at first, but as we see by the end of the story, Sukuna does come to love and care for the child, although he would never admit it. The feeling is mutual too, as Uraume has done everything in his power to incarnate Sukuna into the present era and will attack anybody who's even rude to Sukuna, although this can sometimes backfire. Uraume is extremely powerful enough to a point where he's allowed to hang with Sukuna on a regular, which is a feat in itself. Uraume's first showing at the climax of the Shibuya incident would display him almost eradicating all of Jujutsu High sorcerers without really trying, only for them to be saved by Yuki Tsukumo. After this, Uraume would have his first actual battle in the final saga against Hakkari, although most of it was off-screened. Uraume's curse technique is ice formation, this giving him the ability to create ice from the air, and Uraume also has access to reverse curse technique. Hakkari Kinji is the first third year we'd meet in Jujutsu Kaisen after a few years of build-up throughout the story. Easy to say, his build-up did not disappoint. Hakkari is a very hot-headed, passionate, and kind person who is driven by the fever burning within others. Hakkari, due to his rocky past with Jujutsu Tech and being suspended and all that, wasn't really keen on risking his life to help the sorcerers free Gojo, but he would see that Yuji's fever burned strong, so he gave in. After agreeing to help the sorcerers, Hakkari would serve as an older brother type of character, as he would instantly declare himself to be the one to search for Kashimo, as it's his responsibility as the strongest sorcerer on the team. Hakkari is also a man of his word, never failing to make anything he promised come to fruition. He, like all the other students, gets a happy ending at the end of the story. Hakkari, like Kashimo, has a special property behind his cursed energy. His cursed energy feels extremely sharp and rough, so his strikes tend to do more damage to people than they normally should. Hakkari also has so much finesse with cursed energy and Jujutsu as a whole that he knows how to deploy binding vows at the spur of the moment in order to protect himself from fatal attacks. Hakkari's curse technique primarily revolves around a domain expansion like Higuruma's. Essentially, Hakkari plays a gachapon machine until he lands a jackpot. If Hakkari does land that jackpot, he will enter to a jackpot state where he gains infinite curse energy. With so much curse energy coursing through his body will reflexively use reverse curse technique to instantly heal any damage that will come his way. Funnily enough, he can't even explain how to use reverse curse technique if you were to ask him. Hakkari also regains all of his curse energy after this infinite curse energy state, so he can cast this domain again. Essentially, the only way to put down Hakkari is to land a fatal blow in the instant between his jackpot state ending and him casting another domain expansion. I'm sure you can see why he's so high up on the list. The only thing preventing him from being any higher is more showcases and feats. Now, we finally reach the protagonist, Yuji Itadori. Yuji Itadori is a very compassionate, well-intended, and kind person that serves as the perfect character to follow in this story. As the boy cursed when inhabiting the King of Curses within his body, he's tasked with collecting all the remnants of his power and being executed soon after so he can save as many people from the effects that Sukuna's presence has on this world. But as we see, things aren't as simple as they should be. Sukuna's working on a plan to escape Yuji's body, Mahito's out to make his life hell, and Kenjaku had Yuji's life planned out before he was even born. At the end of it all, Yuji does manage to overcome all of these antagonists and live a happy life as a sorcerer. Yuji being the protagonist is certainly going to have a bag, and although he has nothing but hands for majority of the saga, he gets a care package in the final saga. Firstly, Yuji has the ability to almost willingly use the Black Flash and awaken from doing so. On top of this, Yuji has 2 curse techniques, the prized blood manipulation of the Kamo clan and the curse technique of Ryomen Sukuna, Shrine. But Yuji improved on Sukuna's shrine by creating a binding vow that allows him to directly slash the souls of his opponents. Yuji can also use reverse curse technique to extremely high levels, as Sukuna would deal serious damage to him and he'd return to battle each time. He also has simple domain to combat domain expansions. Lastly, Yuji has his own domain expansion that is unnamed, but it has the short hit effect of slashing the souls of his opponents. Yuji is also the most resilient character in the series. Nobody can take a beating and continue to fight like he can. He certainly earned his spot in the top 10 by the end of the story. After Sukuna's grandnephew, we have his self-proclaimed lover, Yorozu. Yorozu was incarnated into the Culling Game far before we were aware of it, as she would use Sumiki's memories to pretend to be her, although she was actually possessing her the entire time. She makes her reveal the moment that everybody passes their points onto her so she can forfeit, but instead uses the points to open up all of the colonies. This reveal and betrayal shattered Megumi's soul, giving Sukuna the perfect opportunity to steal Megumi's body. Moving past her introduction that flipped the series on its head, Yorozu was an extremely powerful sorcerer and believed herself to be powerful enough to free Sukuna of his loneliness, although strength was never required to do so in the first place. Aside from this, Yorozu was obsessed with Sukuna and challenged him with the intention of getting married if she defeated him, to which Sukuna actually accepts. Of course, Sukuna actually ends up killing her relatively easily, as he does for anybody in the series. Yorozu was an insanely powerful sorcerer, as she was a big shot in the golden age of Jujutsu with a far less efficient curse technique than most. She was able to give a restrained 15-finger Sukuna a decent bit of trouble in their battle, and she even blitzed him a few times, but despite this, she still wasn't powerful enough for Sukuna to utilize his shrine technique to cut her down. Yorozu's curse technique is the same as Mai's, which is construction. She instead utilizes this curse technique by creating liquid metal, as it has volume that's easy to manipulate, while also having stable physical properties when combined with her curse energy. Yorozu is able to send multiple attacks with this liquid metal, use it to create liquid metal flesh armor completely replicating the biofunctions of insects, vastly improving her strength, and even create a true spear. An object that generates infinite pressure would instantly eradicate anything it makes contact with. Yorozu can make this attacker short hit within her domain expansion if she chooses, which makes it 100 times more devastating. Yorozu overall boasts insane feats, stats, an extremely flexible curse technique when used by her, and an attack that instantly eradicates anything it makes contact with. She's certainly one of the most powerful characters in the series. Yuki Tsukumo is another one of the 4 special grade sorcerers in Jujutsu Kaisen, but she's known as the lazy one who doesn't take any missions. Although that's her reputation, the reason why she doesn't take missions is because she was doing covert work and tons of research behind the scenes to create a curse-free world. She eventually shows herself in the climax of the Shibuya incident and works alongside Yuta and the rest to prevent Kenjaku from succeeding with his plans. She eventually confronts Kenjaku directly, but is defeated and passes away from their battle, leaving words of encouragement to Choso that pushed him to value his life more, and a book full of her research which contained the key to freeing Megumi from Sukuna's possession. She was also the mentor of Todo and taught him everything he knows. Yuki, being one of the 4 special grade sorcerers, has the capacity to take over an entire country if she pleased. Yuki was also able to engage in direct combat with Kenjaku, but was only at a disadvantage for most of the fight due to following Tengen's plan instead of casting her own domain expansion. Despite this, being able to fight Kenjaku and push him as far as she did is an extremely impressive feat, as Kenjaku is a supremely powerful sorcerer. Yuki Tsukumo's curse technique is Star Rage. This is a curse technique that gives virtual mass to herself and her Shikigami Garuda that she tends to wield as a shape-shifting weapon. Yuki can pretty much destroy anything when adding the virtual mass to her already insanely high strength. She's also done things like apply it to Garuda while having Garuda take the shape of a ball and kick it towards her opponent. It's pretty dope and insane. Yuki just has unparalleled offense in exchange for nothing. If Yuki exerts as much virtual mass as she possibly can, she can also generate a black hole on the spot to absorb everything within its vicinity. But this is a last resort used on the brink of death. Yuki also has reverse curse technique and simple domain, and she even has a domain expansion that was never shown, so her bag is certainly deep. The God of Lightning Hajime Kashimo bolts right in before we get into the final picks of the list. Kashimo actually comes from the exact time period that Ryu originates from, but like Ryu, he would incarnate into the Culling Game in order to face the strongest sorcerer in history, Sukuna. He primarily does this not just for the challenge, but to find an answer behind the purpose of his strength and what his role in the world truly was. We meet Kashimo in Tokyo Colony No. 2, where he has a very long battle with Hakkari, losing in the end, but primarily losing due to his refusal to use his curse technique against anyone that isn't Sukuna. After this battle, he agrees to work with Hakkari, since Hakkari promised to let him fight Sukuna if they can get his help. After the defeat of Gojo, Kashimo is the first one to step in and challenge the King of Curses, doing a good enough job to force Sukuna to incarnate into his true form, but is killed right after. It's also important to point out that Kashimo understood Gojo better than most characters in the cast did, as Kashimo would not allow anybody to interfere with Gojo's fight under any circumstances, as he can understand Gojo's position in his time as the strongest, and knew that Gojo had longed for a one-on-one fight such as this deep down inside, as everyone who holds the position of the strongest once has. Kashimo is an insanely powerful character, as he was able to combat Hakkari, someone comparable to Yuta with no curse technique. Nothing but just hands in the properties of his curse energy. Speaking of his curse energy, he boasts a special trait to it, which is his curse energy having the properties of an electric current, which by proxy always puts his body in a state of being electrified. Due to this special nature, all of Kashimo's attacks will shock his opponents on impact. He gains immunity to electricity, and he can build up a lightning discharge attack to launch an extremely powerful lightning bolt at his opponent that will always hit them no matter what. There is a downside to this though, in which, if he's put in water, his body would discharge all of his curse energy at an extremely fast rate. His special curse energy alone allowed him to battle Hakkari. Kashimo's curse technique is Mythical Beast Amber, this allowing him to enter a state that surpasses his humanity, transforming him into a monster made of lightning that would just boost his stats tremendously. This transformation allowed him to battle against Sukuna, albeit for a brief period of time. Kashimo doesn't find himself any higher because of the lack of a domain expansion. Yuta Okkotsu finds himself in the 4th spot of this list. Serving as the original protagonist of Jujutsu Kaisen, Yuta is a special grade sorcerer who cares for nothing more than protecting the people he loves by any means necessary. After the events of the Shibuya incident, Yuta stands in for Gojo at his request and helps the students with the events of the Culling Game in order to free Gojo, which is eventually successful. And then, he plays a massive role in the final battle against Sukuna, having 2 separate rounds against the King of Curses which both massively weakened him. Yuta shows in these battles that he typically feels responsible for anything that goes wrong, and that he's not above using questionable methods in order to defeat an evil person, as morals are all out the window when it comes to those like Sukuna. Yuta being a special grade sorcerer is obviously more powerful than most in the series, but where he stands out compared to the rest is his nearly bottomless curse energy capacity. Yuta even has more curse energy than Gojo himself. This gives Yuta a massive advantage in battle, as they're typically able to predict the sorcerer's next movement by seeing what part of their body they will reinforce with curse energy, but Yuta has the ability to reinforce his entire body with curse energy at all times, making his movements unpredictable. Yuta also has enough power to send shockwaves with his curse energy that can do tons of damage to anybody hit by it. Yuta's curse technique is the ability to copy other curse techniques if his Shikigami Rika has consumed one of their body parts. The more powerful the technique, the more vital the body part must be. Yuta has many techniques under his belt such as sky manipulation and curse speech. Yuta also has a very powerful Shikigami in the form of Rika, which she serves as an external memory card for Yuta's curse techniques and tools he's collected over time. She's also a very powerful combatant herself, even powerful enough to fight Sukuna alongside Yuta. When you're fighting Yuta, you're fighting a 2-on-1. Yuta can also activate a complete manifestation with Rika, which is the only time when Yuta can actually use the techniques he's copied outside of his domain expansion. This complete manifestation boosts the strength of Rika while letting Yuta use his copy ability. It only lasts 5 minutes. Yuta is a character with all sorts of versatility and options, which is why he's so dangerous. Before we get into the final 3, I think Fumihiko Takaba, our favorite failed comedian, should be brought up as an honorable mention to the entire list. Takaba is a man who's always aspired to become a comedian. He would somehow be turned into a sorcerer by Kenjaku and take place in the Culling Game wearing a half-naked bodysuit for some reason. Despite this, he runs into Megumi in Tokyo Colony No. 1 and decides to help him as he saw that Megumi was being jumped and found it unfair. Despite his goofy attitude and his desire to speak only through jokes, we quickly find out that Takaba is a force to be reckoned with. Takaba actually decides to stick with Yuji and Megumi for pretty much the rest of the series after meeting them, as I guess he found them quite entertaining. Takaba's also pivotal to the final saga, as he was able to combat Kenjaku completely alone and provide Kenjaku some sort of satisfaction through being the embodiment of chaos he's always sought before Yuta would assassinate him. Takaba makes it to the end of the series, continuing his journey to become a comedian. Takaba makes it this high as an honorable mention on the list because of his ability, comedian. If Takaba thinks something will be funny, it will become reality. Yes, Takaba is a reality manipulator. Comedian can only be used if Takaba really believes in himself and his jokes, and is very powerful because it draws its opponents into idiocy and jokes that Takaba would create using the technique, as Takaba typically wants the full attention of his audience, so there's no domain expansion to counter it or anything like that. The only way to defeat Takaba is to heckle him strategically and intelligently, which you actually need to have knowledge on the topic of comedy for him to take any of your criticism seriously. With Kenjaku just randomly being someone who watched hundreds of hours of comedy shows, he was able to combat Takaba and barely defeat him. Anybody else will more than likely be stuck in his technique until they're completely drained of all their strength. Takaba is an honorable mention rather than an actual inclusion on the list, because given the nature of his technique and the fact that only one character has the knowledge to defeat it, it's very hard to give him a fair placement, but we'll just say that he hangs around this range of strength. Kenjaku is a curse user who's been present in the history of Jujutsu Kaisen for over 1,000 years, manipulating the events of history through possessing the bodies of countless powerful sorcerers and stealing their identities. Some bodies he's stolen, for example, are Suguru Geto's and the mother Yuji Itadori's, Kaori Itadori. He's even committed atrocities in some of the bodies he's inhabited. Being over 1,000 years old, supremely powerful, and having everything go his way has caused Kenjaku to become a pretty arrogant person to a point where he'll just sit there and ramble about his goals to evolve humanity, while curb stomping all of his opponents and giving them absolutely no attention. Kenjaku is extremely intelligent and even cunning enough to outplay everybody who cuts a deal with him. Kenjaku's primary goal is to evolve humanity beyond its current state through using curse energy, to create a being that lies beyond that, and to be the one to discover what it is. And he comes extremely close to achieving this until his plan is foiled by the sorcerers of Tokyo Jujutsu High. Kenjaku is over 1,000 years old, and with that, he possesses over 1,000 years of Jujutsu sorcery, knowledge, and experience. Not only this, he's said to be one of the greatest hand-to-hand combatants, while being able to shrug off every single attack in the series and not showing a single sign of pain or stress. You can even make the argument that Kenjaku has higher endurance than Yuji Itadori himself if you wanted to. Kenjaku's primary technique is to transplant his brain into the bodies of other sorcerers, with the stitching on the forehead being a part of the technique to show that the technique is being used. Kenjaku is also able to use techniques from his previous or current bodies, as we see him use both Kaori's anti-gravity system and curse bear manipulation while inhabiting Suguru's body. Kenjaku can also use reverse curse technique and is one of the 2 characters in the series to boast an open barrier type domain expansion. This type of domain expansion displaying such a mastery in the art of Jujutsu that's the equivalent to an artist painting on thin air. Kenjaku through curse bear manipulation has so many options alone, but give him the open barrier domain expansion that gives him an advantage over almost every other domain expansion in the series, and it's an instant win condition for him. Kenjaku was said to be one of the 3 monsters of the series by Mei Mei shortly after she had attacked Sukuna in the final saga, and you can't blame her. This is the same guy who was able to defeat a special grade sorcerer and 2 other sorcerers at the same time. He's simply built different. At number 2, we have Satoru Gojo, the strongest sorcerer of the modern era and the man who discovered true strength. The boy who changed and reshaped the entire world of sorcery when he was born. Gojo is the last special grade sorcerer on the list, but honestly, he should be in a class of his own, as all the other special grades are ants to him. Known as someone who's quite arrogant and playful, Gojo is a sorcerer who is way more complex than he looks, as he's been through many unique and helpless situations growing up, many that being the strongest alone cannot fix. Despite this, Gojo makes it his mission to create the next generation of sorcerers that will not have to go through anything he once did, and those who will become his equals. Gojo's story ends with his defeat at the hands of Sukuna after an extremely long and difficult battle. We see that his goal fully manifests in the final chapter of the series, where he asks Yuji to actually forget him as the concept of the strongest and take a different approach as to what it means to be the strongest, as he doesn't think that he's the solution. And Yuji actually does manage to find a true solution, as he's able to defeat Sukuna in every way possible. Gojo being up here has high stats for sure, but his stats are so high that he can probably 1 or 2 shot everybody else in the series if he's so pleased. He wouldn't need his curse technique for anybody below him. That's how massive the gap is between the last 2 characters on this list and everybody below them. Gojo also has the 6 eyes, which allows him to see the curse energy in the world much better than anyone else, and wield it much better than anybody else. Gojo almost uses no curse energy for techniques that would instantly drain the average sorcerer. Gojo also has the curse technique of the Limitless. This curse technique essentially giving Gojo absolute control over the concept of space. But since Limitless is so hard for the human brain to actually understand and calculate, the 6 eyes are required for the technique to completely function. Gojo can apply the Limitless in tons of ways. He can create a paradoxical barrier that will infinitely cut the distance between him and his opponent if they try to attack him. This barrier works as the equivalent to a math equation where you cut any number in half forever. You can divide the number by 2 millions of times, but the result will be 0. In other words, you will never reach him, no matter how close you get. Gojo can also create orbs that can repel his opponents, sending them flying at insane speeds, or he can create orbs that can attract them or anything in the world that he pleases. He can even use the technique called Purple to shoot a ball with imaginary mass that will rip and tear anything in its way. Gojo's most powerful technique is from his domain expansion, the Unlimited Void. When landing this technique, he will force his victim to receive an endless amount of information at insane speeds. This will fry their brain and leave them defenseless for him to finish them off. Any domain expansion that prevents their opponent from acting is far more powerful than those that do damage, so this is possibly the best in the series. Gojo overall is insanely powerful, and if you clicked on this video, you knew he was going to be this high. At number 1, we have the King of Curses and the strongest sorcerer in history, Ryomen Sukuna. Sukuna is an extremely prideful and sadistic hedonist. He doesn't care for the consequences of his actions and will cause mayhem whenever he's on screen. He loves to remind everyone of his dominance over the entire cast. But under all of this bravado that Sukuna typically shows, there's a bit of nuance with this character. See, Sukuna being the strongest in history, the man who completely dominated the Heian era, and all of the above, sees our protagonist Yuji as the antithesis to everything he stands for. Sukuna being a man who's reached the top by absolving himself of all connections and love, sees Yuji doing the same while keeping those connections, and it bothers him to his core. Sukuna also serves as the final antagonist or rival to many more characters in the cast. He resembles something different to each character who challenges him and is their final test given physical form. And to me, that's what makes him so interesting. Sukuna meets his end at the hands of Yuji, but in the afterlife, we see that since Yuji defeated him, he felt the desire to try out Yuji's way of living, which in a way is him passing on his title of the strongest to Yuji, as strength is still what Sukuna seeks. It's just that Yuji's method of growing in strength did overcome Sukuna, so he honored that and said, "I'll give it a shot since my way lost." Sukuna is the only character in the series who can rival Gojo, and he was even able to defeat him and cut him down. What makes Sukuna so dangerous is his ability to calculate. Every battle against Sukuna is a race against time, as if he can understand your technique, he will begin to find a way to overcome it and cut you down before you even realize that he has. His stats are also insane. He was able to perception blitz and one-shot Ryu Ishigori, once giving him some respect and going all out. Keep in mind, this was while he was still in a weakened state. Sukuna's primary curse technique is Shrine. He can launch slashes at his opponents or cut them down once making physical contact with them. He can also generate a flame that can be shot and burn his opponents alive. It's just that the flame is pretty slow and can only be used in a one-on-one outside of his domain expansion due to a binding vow. Sukuna also has access to the 10 Shadows technique after possessing Megumi's body. But unlike Megumi, he has control over all 10 of the Shikigami, including Mahoraga itself. He can also combine the Shikigami to make them powerful enough to assist him in a battle against Gojo. Sukuna's domain expansion is the Malevolent Shrine. This technique is better used in an area with buildings around it, as Sukuna does need the dust and debris to be used as a trigger. Malevolent Shrine consists of Sukuna expanding his domain for up to 200 meters, and he will rain an endless barrage of slashes to everything within it. All dust and debris will be imbued with a coat of explosive curse energy, and once Sukuna sees that this is complete, he will launch his flame to trigger thousands of chain explosions on top of his opponents. This technique is unavoidable. Sukuna also has access to reverse curse technique, domain amplification, hollow wicker basket, 4 arms and 2 mouths, which allows him to constantly increase the potency of his jujutsu through constantly chanting and hand signs, and above everything Sukuna can do, he has a technique that surpasses all the laws of the world cutting slash. Sukuna will use this technique to defeat Gojo, and simply put, Sukuna takes the world as his canvas and draws a line on whichever part of the world that he wants to cut. After this, the slash will manifest itself on top of whatever Sukuna drew the line on. This technique simply appears from the perspective of the opponent, and nothing you do can stop or block it. Sukuna does require 3 arms to use it after the first time he activates it against Gojo, so you can stop him from using it by cutting off his arms or preventing him from setting it up. Without a doubt, Sukuna is the strongest character within Jujutsu Kaisen. With that said, that about covers this behemoth of a list. Thank you so much for watching. I put a lot of time and effort into this, and I'll catch you on the next one.